I had been married to Linda for 38 years. Nearly 4 decades of trust, love, and what I thought was an unbreakable bond. We built a life together, a beautiful house, vacations, and a comfortable retirement plan. I believed we were partners in everything. But life has a cruel way of revealing the truth when you least expect it. It all started on an ordinary Thursday morning. I had planned to surprise Linda with a weekend trip for our upcoming anniversary. So, I stopped by the bank to withdraw some cash for the reservations. The teller, a friendly young woman who had known me for years, frowned as she pulled up my account. "Sir, your savings account is nearly empty," she said cautiously. I laughed, thinking it had to be a mistake. "That's impossible. There should be over $500,000 in there." Her face remained serious. "There was. Until last week." My stomach dropped. "Where did the money go?" She turned the screen toward me, and there it was, a single transaction for $450,000 sent to someone named John Harris. I had never heard that name in my life. A sinking feeling spread through me. "Who authorized this transfer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Your wife." I froze. Linda had access to our joint account, of course. But why would she transfer almost everything we had to a stranger? I pulled out my phone and called her. It rang twice, then straight to voicemail. That was odd. Linda always answered my calls. Something wasn't right. I rushed home, hoping to find Linda there and demand an explanation. But the house was empty. Not just empty, her closet was half empty. Several of her favorite dresses were gone, along with her expensive jewelry. I checked the bathroom. Her perfume bottles were missing. My pulse quickened. I opened our safe. Empty. That's when it hit me. She wasn't coming back. I felt like a fool. A man who had built a life with a woman who had just stolen everything from him. But then I saw something that changed everything. A document lying on the desk. At first glance, it looked like some kind of property paperwork. But when I picked it up and read it, my blood ran cold. It was a contract for the sale of our house. Linda was selling our home. Without me. And the worst part? The buyer was listed as John Harris. I clenched my jaw, my mind racing. Who the hell was John Harris? And why was my wife giving him everything we had? I needed answers. And I needed them fast. I stood in the middle of my half-empty house, gripping the contract in my hands. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Linda was selling our home. Our life savings were gone. And she was nowhere to be found. But I wasn't going to sit back and let this happen. I snapped a photo of the contract with my phone and called my lawyer, Daniel Carter. He picked up on the second ring. "Mark? What's going on?" "I need to see you. Now." An hour later, I was sitting in Daniel's office, my hands still clenched into fists. He skimmed through the documents I had brought, his face growing darker with every page. "This doesn't look good," he finally said. "Legally, since your name is on the house, she can't sell it without your signature. But this," he pointed to a document near the back. "This is a forged power of attorney. It gives her full control over your assets." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Forged?" He nodded grimly. "Your signature is on this, but I know you didn't sign it. If we take this to court, we can stop the sale." That was a relief, but it didn't explain who John Harris was and why Linda had sent him almost $500,000. I leaned forward. "I need to know who this guy is." Daniel sighed. "That's not my area, but I know a guy." 3 hours later, I was sitting in a dimly lit diner across from a private investigator named Tom Reed. He was a former cop, the kind of guy who had seen it all. He took one look at the documents and let out a low whistle. "Man, your wife really screwed you over," he said, shaking his head. "John Harris isn't just some guy. He's got a history." I gritted my teeth. "Tell me." Tom pulled out his phone and scrolled through some files. Then he turned the screen toward me. Mugshot. A man in his mid-40s, slicked back hair, smirking like he owned the world. John Harris, convicted fraudster. My stomach twisted. "He's a con man," Tom continued. "Did a few years in prison for running investment scams. Targeted rich women, promised them luxury, then disappeared with their money. Looks like your wife was his latest mark." I exhaled sharply. So that was it. Linda thought she was leaving me for a rich businessman. Instead, she had handed everything we built to a career criminal. For a brief second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered my empty bank account. My nearly stolen house. No. She deserved whatever was coming next. I leaned back and nodded to Tom. "I want to know everything. Where he lives, where she is, and how deep they are in this." Tom grinned. "Now you talking. Give me 48 hours. I left the diner feeling something I hadn't felt since this nightmare started. Control. Linda thought she had outsmarted me. But she had no idea what was coming. For the first time in days, I felt like I was ahead of the game. Linda and her conman lover thought they had me cornered, but they underestimated me. That was their biggest mistake. 2 days later, Tom called. "Got everything you need," he said. "Meet me at my office." I arrived within 30 minutes, and Tom laid out a thick file on his desk. "John Harris has been living in a penthouse downtown. Paid for in cash. Your wife's been seen going in and out for the last 2 weeks." I clenched my jaw. 2 weeks. That meant she had been sleeping with him while still pretending to be my wife. Tom flipped through a few photos. "They've been spending like crazy. Fancy dinners, private shopping sprees, expensive jewelry. But here's the thing, Harris is already in debt. He owes money to some serious people. I wouldn't be surprised if he's planning to use your wife's money to get himself out of trouble." So she wasn't just a fool. She was a fool who had just become his next victim. Tom smirked. "Now, here's where it gets interesting. Harris has another woman. Young, blonde, about half your wife's age." My eyebrows shot up. "Wait, you telling me he's cheating on my wife?" Tom nodded. "Looks like it. He's been seen with this other woman at a different hotel. Meanwhile, your wife thinks she's the only one." I sat back in my chair. This was gold. Linda betrayed me for this guy. She gave up everything we had, and he was already playing her. I smiled for the first time in a while. "So what do you think, Tom? Should I let her find out the hard way, or should I speed things up?" Tom chuckled. "I like the way you think. What's the plan?" I looked down at the file, my mind racing. Then it hit me. Explosion symbol. I was going to make sure she lost everything. Just like she planned for me. That night, I made 2 phone calls. Pushpin 1 to my lawyer. Daniel was going to block the sale of the house immediately. Pushpin the other, to John Harris himself. I used a burner phone, disguising my voice slightly. "John, I hear you're looking for investors." There was silence on the other end. Then, a cautious, "Who's asking?" I smirked. "Let's just say I know someone who can help you with your financial problems. Let's meet." He hesitated but then agreed. "Tomorrow night. The Oak Room. 8 p.m. Perfect. Because Linda would be there, too. The next evening, I arrived early. The Oak Room was an upscale restaurant, one of the places Linda used to beg me to take her to. Now, she was dining there with a man who was playing her for a fool. I sat at the bar, just within earshot of their table. Linda looked radiant, dressed in a red silk gown, dripping in expensive jewelry. Jewelry bought with my money. She was laughing, toasting to their new life. I waited until they were halfway through their meal before making my move. Pushpin first, I sent a text to Linda. Enjoying dinner? You paid for it with my money. She read the message, and I saw her face go pale. Pushpin then, I sent a text to the blonde girl. Your boyfriend is with his fiancée right now. Thought you should know. I didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, a woman stormed into the restaurant, young, blonde, furious. She walked straight to the table, stopping next to Linda. You lying piece of trash, the blonde screamed at John. I knew something was off, but this? You told me you were single. Linda looked from the blonde to John, realization dawning on her face. Wait, what is she talking about? John tried to recover, but it was too late. The entire restaurant was staring at them. And then I stood up. I walked over slowly, enjoying the way Linda's eyes widened when she saw me. Surprise, I said, smiling. Missed me? Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I turned to John. I hope you enjoyed spending my money, because as of tomorrow, every cent is locked down. And your little house of cards? It just collapsed. John shot up from his chair, but before he could speak, two men in suits entered the restaurant and headed straight for him. Tom had been right, John owed money to some dangerous people. Linda watched in horror as the men grabbed John by the collar and dragged him outside. Wait, she cried. John, tell me this isn't true. But he was gone. And she was alone. I leaned in close, just enough for her to hear. Now you know how it feels to be betrayed. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her to clean up the mess she had made. Explosion symbol. Linda lost everything. Just like she planned for me. I walked out of the restaurant feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The look on Linda's face, pure shock, betrayal, and devastation, was something I would never forget. She had spent months plotting against me, and in just one night, I had torn her entire world apart. But I wasn't done yet. She still had one last illusion left, that she could somehow recover, that she could still land on her feet. I knew Linda wouldn't just sit back and accept defeat. That wasn't her style. She had spent our entire marriage manipulating people. She was a survivor, a schemer. I could already picture her next move. She would try to contact John. She had given him almost all our money, and she would be desperate to get it back. She would try to play the victim, to twist the story and make herself look like the poor, betrayed wife. She would come for me next. I needed to stay one step ahead. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. Freeze every account with Linda's name on it, I told the manager. The woman hesitated. Sir, as it stands, her name is still legally on. I slid a document across the table. Not anymore, I said, smirking. The night before, I had filed for an emergency asset protection order, citing fraud. Every dollar Linda hadn't given to John was now locked down, inaccessible to her. By the time Linda realized what had happened, it was too late. That afternoon, my phone rang. Linda. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. Finally, a text came through. Mark, I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I need to explain. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back 2 words. Too late. Then I blocked her number. Let her sit with that. I could have walked away then. I had my money. She had nothing. But Linda had spent years making me feel like I wasn't enough. Mocking me, belittling me, using me. I wanted her to feel the weight of every mistake she had made. And I knew exactly how to do it. Linda's friends, the ones who laughed with her behind my back? They were about to find out who she really was. Her family, the ones she always played the perfect wife in front of? They were about to see her for what she had become. And her job? That was about to disappear, too. I pulled up a folder full of evidence Tom had gathered. Messages, emails, bank transfers. Everything proving Linda had stolen money, committed fraud, and planned to run away with a scam artist. I drafted an anonymous email. One to her boss. You might want to look into this employee's financial activities. One to her family. You deserve to know the truth. One to her closest friends. I thought you'd want to see what she was really up to. Then I hit send. Within hours, her entire life exploded. By the end of the week, Linda was jobless, penniless, and completely alone. John Harris was on the run. The people he owed money to weren't as forgiving as I was. Linda's employer fired her immediately. A fraud investigation was opened. Her friends turned against her the second they realized she had been lying to them, too. She tried to call me again. This time, I picked up. Mark, please, she sobbed. I have nothing left. I let out a slow breath, then said the words I had been waiting to say for weeks. Good. Then I hung up. Linda had destroyed our life together. I had simply returned the favor. And now? I was finally free. Silence. That was all that remained after I ended the call. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more Linda. I sat in my chair, staring at my phone, knowing she was on the other end, broken, desperate, realizing for the first time in her life that she had lost everything. The weight of her betrayal had crushed me, but now, it was her turn to feel it. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. My house was still mine, my bank accounts were safe, and my reputation was intact. Everything she had planned to steal from me, I had taken back. But something inside me felt unfinished. She deserved worse. I needed to see for myself what rock bottom looked like for her. I drove to our old house, not because I wanted to, but because I knew she would be there. She had nowhere else to go. Her friends had abandoned her, John was long gone, and her own family had turned their backs on her after I sent them the truth. I parked down the street and watched from a distance. Linda was standing on the front porch, phone in hand, pacing back and forth. She looked disheveled, her once perfect hair tangled, her clothes wrinkled, a far cry from the woman who used to boast about always looking her best. She tried calling someone. No one picked up. She tried again. Nothing. I could see her shoulders slump in defeat. She was truly alone. Then, as if she felt my presence, she turned her head, scanning the street. Her eyes landed on my car. Even from a distance, I could see the desperation in them. She started walking toward me. I rolled down my window as she reached my car. Mark, she breathed, tears in her eyes. Please, just let me explain. I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Explain what, Linda? How you stole from me? How you were going to sell our house behind my back? Or how you planned to disappear with a con man and leave me with nothing? She flinched, her lip trembling. I wasn't thinking straight. John convinced me. I laughed, shaking my head. No, Linda. You made a choice. You wanted more. You thought I was weak, disposable. Now look at you. She swallowed hard, glancing at the house behind her. I have nothing left, Mark. I let that hang in the air between us. Good, I finally said. A sob escaped her lips. Please, I need help. I don't have anywhere to go. I studied her for a long moment. The woman who once thought she was untouchable now stood before me, begging for mercy. But mercy wasn't something I owed her. I reached into my glove compartment, pulled out an envelope, and held it out to her. She took it eagerly, her hands shaking as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the document, and whatever hope she had left vanished in an instant. "This," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is the finalization of our divorce." "That's right," I said, my voice cold. "Everything is settled. You get nothing. No house. No money. No support. Just like you planned for me." She clutched the paper to her chest, her breath coming in quick gasps. "Mark, please. I don't know what to do." I sighed, acting as if I were considering something. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $1 bill, and tossed it onto the passenger seat. "There. That's more than what you left me with." Tears streamed down her face. "I loved you," she whispered. I scoffed. "No, Linda. You loved what I gave you. And now that it's gone, you realizing it was never enough." I put the car in drive and pulled away, watching her shrink in my rearview mirror. She had spent so many years looking down on me, thinking she was better, thinking she could trade me in for something newer, richer, more exciting. But in the end, she was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a woman who played the game and lost everything. And me? I was finally free. The feeling of freedom should have been exhilarating, but as I drove away from Linda, I felt something unexpected: emptiness. Not regret, not sorrow, just a hollow space where she used to be. For nearly 4 decades, she had been a part of my life. And now? She was nothing more than a mistake I had finally erased. I pulled into my driveway, stepping into the house that was once ours but now only mine. The silence was deafening. No fake smiles, no passive-aggressive remarks, no scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. I poured myself a drink and sat down in my armchair, staring at the divorce papers I had handed her. It was done. Everything was finalized. She had lost everything, and I had walked away unscathed. Then why didn't I feel victorious? Maybe because I knew Linda wasn't the type to disappear quietly. I checked my phone, 10 missed calls from an unknown number. I knew it was her. I took another sip of my drink, debating whether to block the number, but something inside me wanted to hear what she had to say. I let the phone ring again. And this time, I answered. "Mark," she breathed, her voice weak, defeated. "Please don't hang up." I stayed silent, letting her squirm. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she continued, her voice breaking. "I know I ruined everything. But I have nothing, Mark. I just need to talk to you." I exhaled through my nose. "Talk? About what, Linda? How you tried to ruin me? How you thought you could start a new life with a con man?" She let out a soft sob. "I was stupid. I believed him. I thought he loved me. But he was just using me. And now he's gone. He took everything." I smirked, leaning back in my chair. "So let me get this straight. You betrayed me, stole my money, planned to sell our house, and ran off with a criminal. And now, because he screwed you over, you want me to feel sorry for you?" Silence. "You don't understand, Mark," she finally whispered. "I have nowhere to go." "You should have thought about that before you destroyed our life," I said flatly. "I did love you," she said softly. I got caught up in something bigger than me. I was greedy, and I thought I deserved more. I see now that I already had everything." I let out a bitter chuckle. "You're only saying that because you lost." She sniffled. "Maybe. But it's the truth. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the genuine fear of being alone. It didn't matter. This was the bed she made, and she was going to lie in it. You wanted to talk, Linda, I said. So talk. What do you want from me? She hesitated. A second chance. I nearly laughed out loud. You really are something else. Not as your wife, she quickly added. I know I destroyed that. But, as a friend. Someone who can at least talk to you. I went silent. She wanted me to be her safety net. The man she had mocked, betrayed, and discarded was now the only person left in her life. I took a slow sip of my drink. No. She gasped softly. Mark, please. I'm not your friend, Linda, I said firmly. I'm not your husband. I'm not even someone you can turn to when everything falls apart. You made sure of that. More silence. I have nothing, she whispered. Then maybe you'll finally learn what it feels like to be the person you made me out to be, I said. Goodbye, Linda. I ended the call. And this time, I blocked her number for good. I set my phone down, took a deep breath, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I truly felt free. Days passed, and Linda became nothing more than a fading memory. I didn't hear from her again, not that I expected to. The last time we spoke, she was at her lowest, grasping for anything that would keep her from drowning in the mess she had created. I had finally shut the door on her, and unlike her, I never looked back. I spent the first few days in silence, enjoying the simple fact that I no longer had to walk on eggshells in my own home. I could wake up when I wanted, eat what I wanted, and go wherever I pleased without worrying about someone else's expectations. It was liberating. Then, one evening, I got a call from Tom, the private investigator. I almost didn't answer. I figured there was nothing left to discuss. But curiosity got the better of me. Figured you'd want an update, Tom said. Your ex-wife? She's not doing too well. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the whiskey in my glass. No kidding. Yeah, well, turns out Harris wasn't the only one screwing her over. She owed a lot of people money. Credit cards maxed out, loans under your name. I sat up straight. Loans under my name? Tom chuckled. Relax. Your lawyer caught them in time. They never went through. But she tried. She was betting everything on Harris pulling through. Now she's got nothing. She's been couch hopping between old friends, but from what I hear, they're getting tired of her. I smirked. She thought she was better than me. Now she's begging for scraps. That's not even the best part, Tom continued. Guess where she was spotted yesterday? I took a sip of my drink. Surprise me. At a cheap motel. Alone. No car, no money, just a couple of suitcases. Word is, she tried reaching out to Harris again, but he's long gone. I let that sink in. The woman who once looked down on me, who mocked me for not being good enough, was now destitute, abandoned, and forgotten. A part of me thought about driving past that motel, just to see her one last time. Not to gloat. Not to say anything. Just to witness the final result of her own greed and stupidity. But then I realized something. I didn't care anymore. Linda was no longer a part of my life. She was just a cautionary tale. Thanks for the update, Tom, I said, standing up. But I don't need to hear about her anymore. Fair enough, Tom replied. You did what you had to do. Take care, Mark. I ended the call, walked to my backyard, and looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, my future was truly my own. No more betrayals. No more lies. Just me, my life, and whatever came next. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window. It was strange how something so simple felt so different now. For years, I had woken up to Linda's voice, sometimes nagging, sometimes distant, but always there. Now, my house was filled with nothing but peace. I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat on the back porch, feeling the cool morning breeze against my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Linda. I wasn't replaying our arguments, the betrayal, or the revenge. It was over. I picked up my phone, instinctively scrolling through my contacts. I had spent so many years wrapped up in my marriage that I had lost touch with old friends. I didn't even remember the last time I reached out to someone just to catch up. Without overthinking, I tapped on a familiar name. James. My old friend from college. We used to talk all the time, but somewhere along the way, life got in the way. Or maybe it was Linda keeping me isolated. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. Mark? Damn, I haven't heard from you in ages. I chuckled. Yeah, man. It's been too long. We talked for nearly an hour, reminiscing about old times, laughing about stupid things we did in our 20s. It felt good, natural. Like reconnecting with a piece of myself that had been buried for years. Listen, James said, a few of the guys are getting together next weekend at the lake house. You should come. A few months ago, I would have hesitated. Linda never liked me going out without her. She always made sure I felt guilty for even thinking about spending time away from home. But now? Count me in, I said without hesitation. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, taking in the moment. This was what freedom felt like. Just as I was about to head inside, my phone buzzed again. A text. From an unknown number. Mark, please. I just need to talk. I have nowhere to go. I didn't even have to guess who it was. I stared at the message for a few seconds before doing the only thing left to do. I deleted it. Linda was my past. And I had no intention of letting her ruin my future. I stood up, stretched, and walked inside my house, my home. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The weekend at the lake house was exactly what I needed. Fresh air, old friends, and no reminders of the past. We drank, laughed, and told stories late into the night. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't Mark, the man whose wife betrayed him. I was just Mark, the guy who had a damn good life ahead of him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, James handed me a beer and sat down beside me on the dock. You seem different, he said. Lighter. I took a sip and nodded. I finally got rid of the weight I didn't even know I was carrying. James smirked. Linda? I chuckled. Linda. He shook his head. Never liked her, man. You were blind to it, but the rest of us saw it. She always acted like she was doing you a favor by being with you. I let out a slow breath, staring at the rippling water. I think I knew. Deep down. I just didn't want to admit it. That's what love does to you, James said. Or at least, what you think is love. I turned the bottle in my hands, thinking. It wasn't love. It was control. She made sure I needed her more than she needed me. And the second she found something better. She threw you away, James finished. Like garbage. I didn't respond, but he was right. He nudged my arm. So, what now? That was the real question, wasn't it? For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in my marriage, in being Linda's husband. Now, for the first time in decades, I could do whatever the hell I wanted. I don't know, I admitted. And for once, that doesn't scare me. James grinned. That's the spirit. No more wasting your life on people who don't deserve you. It's time to live, man. And for the first time, I actually believed that. The past was behind me. The future? Mine to create. The morning after the lake house trip, I woke up feeling different. Not just well rested, but clear-headed, as if some invisible fog had finally lifted. For so long, my life had been about holding on to a marriage that was already dead, to a woman who had never truly loved me, to the idea that I needed to be someone I wasn't just to keep her happy. But now, for the first time in decades, I was free. I drove back home with the windows down, letting the wind rush through the car. No more Linda. No more lies. No more living for someone else. I had spent years bending over backward, sacrificing my happiness to keep a marriage alive that had already been rotting from the inside. Not anymore. I pulled into my driveway and stepped into my house, my home. The space that once felt empty now felt like a fresh start. I wasn't a man who had lost everything. I was a man who had dodged a bullet. I sat down at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and scrolling through my phone. For the first time in forever, I felt no urge to check old messages, no impulse to see if Linda had tried to contact me again. She didn't exist in my world anymore. Then, my phone buzzed. Not a call. An email. From my lawyer, Daniel. Subject: a finalized divorce and property transfer. I opened it, scanning through the details. Everything was official. The house was mine. Every last financial tie between me and Linda was severed. And just like that, it was truly over. I exhaled slowly, letting the reality sink in. No more legal battles. No more fear of what she might do next. No more Linda. I grabbed my keys and walked outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. I had wasted enough time in the past. It was time to start living. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed one last time. A message. From an unknown number. Mark. I made a mistake. Please, can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment. Then, without hesitation, I deleted the message. No anger. No second thoughts. Just freedom. I started the engine and drove away, without looking back.